Good evening, and I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Cedar Falls Board of Education with the reminder that the actions taken this evening will focus on our students and their achievement. With that, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Do we have any public comment this evening?
We do not.
Okay, moving on to item D on the agenda, communications. Arlo, would you like to speak on behalf of the student body?
Hi, everyone. So we have kind of a busy couple of weeks with Student Senate right now before break. One thing that is pretty fun that's coming up is we will be having a dance party with the sixth grade class of Hanson on the 19th. That grade won their food drive competition, and so this is their reward. So we'll be going down there and hopefully having a good time with them and congratulating them for their accomplishment. We will also be making luminaries for the Baby It's Cold Outside event for Holiday Hoopla. We will be making them on Saturday, and then we will be out the night of the 21st downtown to help maintain them. So once again, if anyone in the community wants to come down that night, it should be really fun. Scratch and Cup of Joe and all of that are down there, and it should be pretty with all the lights. So we are also starting to focus on promoting and organizing our winter dance called the Snowball, which will be held now at the Mocker Union Ballroom, and that'll be on January 27th. And we will also be going caroling as a student senate before break. In terms of other things coming up at the high school, all three music groups have their winter concerts coming up. So the orchestra has theirs this Thursday, the band on Monday, and the choir the Thursday following that. Yeah, I hope everyone has a happy holidays, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Arlo? Thank you for being here this evening, and just we wish you the best holiday, and take time just to relax while you're off, and thank you for all you do for your student body.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, moving on to the newsletter. Dr.
Yes.
Petty.
Janelle is not able to be here this evening, so I will give you the update on our newsletter and just some of the communication updates. We do have just a short presentation. This is I think the third consecutive meeting now that we're providing this communication update, and again, it just kind of highlights some of the work and some of the aspects that are ongoing across our district. We were just recognized here recently as an AP District Honor Roll recipient. We are one of 3 schools in the state of Iowa. 447 overall districts across the United States and Canada were honored, and this is by growing the number of students taking AP courses, AP exams, and achievement on those exams with a 3 or higher. And 3 is typically the standard to receive the college credit for those AP exams. Just another way to kind of exemplify the tremendous staff that we have. Michelle Drow is a finalist for the Grammy Award. She's a music teacher at Lincoln Elementary, and she is one of 10 in the nation to be in the race to become to win the Grammy Award, which is just really, really neat. We had our first parent university since we last met, and now that is posted on YouTube and Channel 15. The focus of that was on how do we continue to enhance and focus on digital citizenship, and really had a great opportunity to highlight some of the work that's going on across our district, but also advice for parents and community members. Our tremendous instructional coaches presented at UNI. They presented to over 100 pre-service teachers and future educators on the work that we have with technology integration. They really focused on the 4 C's, the collaboration, the critical thinking, the communication, and the creativity aspect, as well as the SAMR model that we utilize. And SAMR is an integration model where it goes from substitution, utilizing technology as a substitution, which is the lowest level, the S, where you might be able to do something with paper and pencil, and then the same on technology, all the way down to how do you redefine or use it as a redefinition. So you're using technology in a way that you can otherwise not possibly do for student learning and student focus. Dance team was just recently at state. They did a tremendous job. Our first in all male. They were first in state, third in POM, and then we also were fourth in hip hop. And they just did a tremendous job representing Cedar Falls, as they always do. We had our instructional technology coaches spend a day focused on level 2 Google training, which is just a huge benefit for us as a district with their work that they do for all of our staff and certainly for our students and their learning. And here is just a few pictures of them working through this training in the day-long assessment work that they did to get that level 2 Google certification. So congratulations to them and thanks for their work on that. This past week, we had Hour of Code, and our students partnered in the Hour of Code. So this is coding, and students working a full hour on coding, and this was done throughout our district in multiple classes. And this was the largest learning event in history. There were more than 100 million students worldwide that participated in this. I think one of the highlights, and there are so many across our district, was at Southdale. We had many John Deere volunteers that came into class, worked with kids on coding, really kind of made it a career embeddedness exploration, which was really exciting and neat to see. Finally, and I won't do Janelle justice on this, but she would always encourage people to check out all of our social media aspects, to look us up and follow us on these different areas, as well as the individual school building Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts, because it's remarkable the work that goes on each and every day in our classrooms and the work that happens for our students.
Thank you.
That AP honor that we got, so that seems to be pretty prestigious. I mean, that's all across the nation, and our district is ranked, what did you say, 8th?
It is the 8th annual AP recognition, and so it's across the United States and Canada. They do basically North America, and we are one of 447 districts in the United States and Canada, but only one of 3 in Iowa that received that distinction. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th year that we've received that distinction. We really pride ourselves on that work, and certainly it's something, a point of pride, not only for our high school, but our entire district, because again, it's all about the achievement and challenging students at those higher levels. Yeah. So, very neat distinction.
Thank you. Moving on then to item E on the agenda, the Secretary's financial report.
Okay, we will go through the financial report for the month of February. If they want to bring it up on the screen, thank you. It's kind of hard to talk about boring subject of budget after listening to all these accomplishments that we've had in the school district here previously, but we'll try and do justice to this for the month of November. As you can see in the general fund, $4.865 million in revenue, $4.783 in expenditures, so an ending balance of $8,492,000. Note as we go through the presentation tonight that we did get an interest rate bump with Lincoln Savings Bank. We talked about that a little bit at the last school board meeting, so we did get a quarter point bump in that, so that will help obviously with a little bit more revenue for the general fund. In management fund, you can see $53,000 in, $9,500 out, so we have a balance of $763,256. And the capital projects fund, interest received for the month was just over $5,800, and we paid out $1.827 million in the different projects, both at Aldrich Elementary, Orchard Hill, and North Cedar. And so you can see our ending balance is just over $20 million. We're actually tracking on a spend down a little bit quicker than we originally projected. That's not a bad thing. It's just that tells us that the contractors have been able to move at a little bit better pace than we initially had anticipated. In the statewide school tax fund, revenue for the month of $913,000. Now that's a combination of receiving 2 months payments. Again, for whatever reason, the state of Iowa, we've been sort of doing 2 payments 1 month, and the next month we won't receive anything, so it's sort of been on a cycle like that. And then we also received our reconciliation payment for the 2016-17 school year, and that was just over $100,000. And you can see expenditures for the month, a very, very small amount, $1,328, and then that transferred to the debt service fund for the debt payment associated with the revenue sales tax fund, so our ending balance is just a little over $8 million. In the physical plant and equipment levy, $292,000 in, $836,000 out for the various projects we have going on throughout the district. Ending balance of $3,224,000. Debt service, there's property tax receipts and interest of $191,000 in. There's that transfer from Fund 33. So we have $2.38 million in the bank, and we have no expenditures, but that will change as our debt service first payment was due December 1st. And so that balance will significantly drop as we make that payment. Student activity, as you can see, $65,700 in, almost $136,000 out for an ending balance of $584,000. In trust and agency account, we had $19,000 in, $41,000 out for a balance of $258,000. Food service, $280,000 in, $262,000 out, and as you can see, our balance is $625,000. Running a little bit ahead of where we were last year. That seems to be pretty consistent this year. And the coffee shop fund, a little bit of activity. You can see that they made had a slight increase in fund balance, so they're at $7,631. And in the River Hills Consortium, we did start receiving tuition payments in November. We had $108,000 come in, and then of course that amount will go out here in the month of December. And you can see that those tuition payments are running a little bit behind where they were a year ago, because last year at this time we had $755,000 in that account. And with that, I'd entertain any questions that the board might have about the November financials.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug regarding the Secretary's financial report? Hearing none, then the report will be placed on file for audit. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Moving on to item F on the agenda, the informational report, learning-based grading.
Yes, we are extremely excited to have both Megan and Christine here this evening to talk and share with the board some of the work that's been ongoing and being undertaken throughout our district, especially at the secondary level. And we are extremely excited for the presentation. There's going to be several videos and several other components as we go through this presentation.
Okay, well, my name is Megan Tresmer, and I've been an English teacher in the district for many years, and I currently serve as Curriculum Professional Development Leader, one of the TLC positions. Thank you. And I'm Christine Mangrich. I'm Instructional Services Coordinator for the district, and this is actually my 7th year. It's hard to believe how long it's been, but yet it seems like 5 minutes ago. As we prepared for tonight, Megan and I were really excited to think about and reflect on where we have been in this journey, and it's been pretty cool and exciting. We really started down this road clear back in like 2011 when we became a professional learning community. Here's just a little snapshot of a timeline that we put together that shows just some of the big rocks of the work that we began, obviously as a PLC in 2011. That following year, we actually implemented the standards-based or standards reference report cards at the elementary level, so we kind of were there really quickly in this process. We continued our work with our guaranteed viable curriculum and really tried to get good at our common formative assessments that next year too. And I think that was really our tipping point when we started working on those formative assessments, that we needed to go deeper and find out a lot more information about how we're grading our kids. And so that really began then some awesome book studies that we did. We really did a lot of research from a variety of experts across the country. And that's kind of led us to where we're at today. In a nutshell, Rebecca DeFore, who is one of the solution tree gurus, has an awesome quote that I wanted to share with you today. And it says, as a PLC, we embrace learning as our fundamental purpose. And because of that, we're willing to examine everything we do. That includes our practices, our programs, our policies, our procedures, absolutely everything through the lens of, does this impact learning in a positive way? And so that's really kind of been a driving force in everything that we have done. We have talked about the 4 critical questions so many times over the past several years since becoming a PLC. There's a lot of stuff that goes into each and every one of those questions, and I'm not going to do that. But what's exciting is the conversations that teams are having each and every week in their collaborative teams really get at the clarity that we needed to have as a district to ensure that the work that students produce and the way that we report their learning truly reflects what they know and can do. That was just a really convicting thing that has come out of all of this work. I think we have a little video here. Mike Mattos, who is also from Solution Tree, who is an individual we have learned a lot from, and actually we have brought him to our district, and so we've got him ready to go.
We've got to get very clear on exactly what all students must learn. PLCs capture it with this question: what do we expect our kids to learn? The first question we ask a team to consider. Marzano would call this a guaranteed viable curriculum. Reeves would call it power standards. I don't care whose vocabulary you want to call it. We know this. If we want all kids to learn, we better get insanely clear on exactly what kids have to learn in this course, this grade level, this subject, to be prepared for next year and beyond.
So Megan can take it away.
I believe you have a handout, Cultural Shifts of a Professional Learning Community. If you don't, on the screen, on that slide, I'm highlighting one section of that, but this handout is in the back of Learning by Doing, which is a book that all staff members have, and it's really the handbook for professional learning communities. And PLCs change everything, and this handout outlines all of the areas where there's a shift in our fundamental purpose, our use of assessments, how we respond when students don't learn. Everything that we're trying to do can be encapsulated on this handout. And if something seems like it came out of left field, it's probably been the work of the PLCs for years. And so if it's like, where did this come from, you can probably find it on the right-hand column of this handout. I would draw your attention to the shift in the use of assessment section. And as Christine mentioned, our early years of PLC, we were really trying to shift from all summative assessments to more formative assessments. So really having a balanced assessment approach. You can think of a formative assessment as a practice or a rehearsal, and a summative assessment would be the game or the performance. And so we really wanted to balance that so that as students are learning, it's not a performance or game every single time, because it takes a while to learn things. Just like you're learning to swim, on the first day of swimming lessons, it's not like, oh, you get this grade. There's a process there. There are some aspects of the work that we can't shift to the right unless we really look in the mirror at what we're doing. The third to last, I would draw your attention to 2 on this sheet. So we're shifting from each teacher determining the criteria to be used in assessing student work to collaborative teams clarifying the criteria and ensuring consistency among team members when assessing student work. So for these required standards that we are required to teach, teachers need to agree, what does that look like? What's proficient? And it's the same no matter which teacher that you have or which school that you're at. The last one in the assessment section, from focusing on average scores to monitoring each student's proficiency in every essential skill. Right there, we had to do some learning there because we're very used to just having this culmination of stuff, of scores and this percentage, and it doesn't tell you a whole lot. Okay, so we have videos of teachers that have been implementing learning-based grading practices in their classroom. And our first one is Brenna Griffin, who's an English teacher at the high school. And she talks in this video about how her shifts in assessment practice really grew out of the work of PLCs.
Well, I think that We have been working through the PLC process for years. We've been working to figure out what's the best way that we can actually understand if kids know what we have expected them to learn. And it became apparent pretty early on in the process that there are some aspects of traditional grading that don't allow us the clarity that we need to fully understand if kids are doing what we're expecting of them. And so with that, we have set out on a journey to better understand assessment and to make sure that our assessment is working to help kids learn rather than do something else that isn't the true intention of public school. So we read a book as a faculty, On Your Mark by Thomas Guskey, and Guskey came to speak with us. We are engaging in another book study now, but I think that is all in tandem with conversations that have been happening in teams of teachers about what it really means to look at student work. So this work has been a long time coming, and it's been built in small conversations along the way, and we're continuing to work to formalize it. I think what's important is that it's a process, and we are still learning in this process just like we would expect kids to do.
Okay, so Learning by Doing, like I mentioned, was really the handbook for professional learning communities for doing this work. Leaders of Learning, our building leadership teams use that book to support district-wide implementation. And this quote from Leaders of Learning really draws a line in the sand, and it says, "Students, teachers, and administrators must undergo a conceptual shift in their approach to assessment, from an assessment system that sorts and selects students to one that actually improves the learning." And that's a before and an after type of thing as a teacher. It's like when you go from sorting and selecting to improving the learning, it changes everything. Okay, so our next video clip is Brittany Engels, and she's a world language teacher at the high school, and she explains how her assessment practices actually work to improve the learning in her classroom.
Learning-based grading has helped provide clarity in my teaching because we have deemed what the 5 most important categories to teach and assess are, so I now have to be intentional to make sure that I am teaching those 5 categories since they will eventually be assessed over it, whereas before I was adding the instruction for these categories in a lot, but it had no clear purpose or outcome in the end since they weren't being assessed over it. Now I know what a student can actually do with their language throughout the semester, so we can continue working on it over time and see their growth throughout the year. Before, since we weren't assessing these competencies or categories very often, we might get to the end of the semester and then I'd realize that some kid was able to slip through the cracks and maybe they didn't know how to speak very well, or they didn't know how to read very well. Now I'm doing multiple assessments throughout the year so that they know what they're strong at, and then they also know their areas of growth and they can specifically work on those things. Beyond the overall clarity in my class, learning-based grading has improved my instruction because I have rubrics that I can use to tell the kids specifically what I'm looking for from them. In order to get to a 3 or a 4 level, I've had to increase the variety of strategies during my teaching that I'm using to show them how to get to that level that I want them at, to get a 3 or get a 4. Now that we both know what they need improvement on most, I've had to dig a little deeper in my instruction to give them better instruction and strategies and activities in what they are working on.
Okay, one thing I forgot to mention. So that conceptual shift that comes out of Leaders by Learning, this book that I know you all have, Grading from the Inside Out, Tom Shimmer does an excellent job of explaining that mindset shift. And it really is, you have to have that mindset shift in order for this to make sense. And I think it's, well, it's in here, but anyway, I can't recommend that book highly enough. Okay, so what are we talking about here? What is learning-based grading?
Can I interrupt real quick,
Yes.
if that's okay, Megan? And that's one of the aspects, and I think this is good for everybody in our community to understand, that is going to be the book that as a board we're going to read and do a book study on, because it's such an important book, as you talked about, as we go through this work and support this work. It's good to have that background and that knowledge base. And if you go back to that slide, the book, the previous slide, I apologize, the book that was the baseline for all of our PLC work, the Robert Eaker and Thomas book is the Learning by Doing. We still give that out to all of our staff members because that is the kind of the framework, the pathway for everything that we believe in as a professional learning community in our collaborative teams. And it's such a strong, powerful book that even though we started that work 7-8 years ago, it is so pertinent and relevant today.
It is. It's one that we both come back to time and time again. Our instructional coaches use that often. And this book, The Grading from the Inside Out, we've got, I don't know how many, Megan, you might have a better count. Oh, we have tons of people actually digging into that together too, furthering their learning on that. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Right, and this book really aligns with Thomas Guskey's On Your Mark that we read last year, and it reestablishes the why of all of this, that mindset, but then it also digs into the how. And so it's really user-friendly for teachers as well. Okay, so what is learning-based grading? Essentially, to state it simply, it's the belief that the grade should reflect what a student knows and can do in relation to the standards. So the grade is based on the learning. You may be thinking, well, isn't that the case now? Oh no, there are all sorts of things that can muddy the water. If you think about, if a student turns something in late, sometimes there's a late penalty. And so the grade in the grade book is muddied because it should be what they know and can do, but if it's half off, 50% or whatever, then you don't know, is there a learning deficiency there? Was it purely behavior? You've got two things that should be communicated separately that are tangled together. And so the idea is we have these standards that we are required to teach. In 2008, Iowa Core was written into law, and so it would make sense that we are assessing students on these standards that we're teaching, and that's what the grade represents. Okay, and so another piece of this too is we can be a lot more specific within our content area in terms of what those skills and concepts are that students need to learn. We expect and rely on this clarity in so many other areas of our life. If you think about, you go to get a checkup. The doctor doesn't say, yep, things are looking good. You have all sorts of numbers that you look at. It's basketball season. When it's halftime, the screen comes up. It doesn't just say the score. We want to know turnovers and how many three-pointers and how many fouls. I mean, all of the specific stuff. Because then the coach goes in the locker room and they start analyzing all of that and making their adjustments. Teachers can do that with more content as well. Heck, I take my car in for an oil change, and I get a grade report for my car that has more information than is sometimes provided. Our next video clip is Heidi Anderson. She's an English teacher at the high school, and she talks about how she provides this sort of clarity and feedback to students in her class.
Like on this test, you got an 82%, you got a B minus, just overall. Now, assessments might have multiple scores based on particular strands. So, for instance, in an English class, you might have a paper that is assessing you on organization and evidence and analysis of your evidence. So you're going to have 3 scores for that one assignment that's giving you a little bit more specific information about where you're at in terms of your learning. Not just overall you did this well on the assignment, but you were proficient on these 2 areas, and in this particular area, analysis, let's say, you have some room to keep working. You're developing, but you're not quite there yet. So giving kids a little bit more targeted information in terms of specific assignments, but more focused on the skills itself rather than the assignment overall.
Okay, so just as PLCs have, districts across our state and the country have embraced the professional learning community model, the assessment practices shift as well. So we have several districts within our own state, this is just a few that we have looked to and learned from, that are embracing this work. One thing about this, there is not one way to do this. There's not like a binder you can take off the shelf that says, here's how you implement learning-based assessment in your district. these are really local decisions that need to be determined based on a lot of discussion and studying and reading. And so you may, it's, if you go online and there's an outcry in one district, that may be related to something that isn't even a factor in your own district. And so one thing that's helpful to remember is that the sorts of information that colleges need for admission is not changing. Students will still have transcripts, they'll still have a GPA, they will still have course letter grades. There are districts that they've eliminated letter grades, and colleges are able to determine admission for those students as well. There are students that are that come to them with all sorts of different experiences, and so we know that eliminating letter grades would not be something that the community would embrace, and so that's not a factor for us. So those things that the colleges are requiring stay in place. The impact of this work is truly well before that, the day-to-day classroom work. Okay, this next slide is Susan Langen. She's a counselor at the high school, and she's talking about counselors' communication with college admissions in Iowa.
So we've been talking a lot to the college admissions folks in the 3 state universities and the private colleges in the state of Iowa at least, and they have also been dealing a lot with students who have been in some kind of a learning-based grading or standards-based grading format for many years. So they're very prepared for our learning-based grading format, and what they're telling us is that since our students will continue to have transcripts, they'll continue to have grades based on the learning of each class, that should not impact any kind of admissions or scholarships, and they haven't seen anything from other schools that would show that they wouldn't be able to get the same kinds of things that they're getting now.
Okay, this brings me to our district's mission statement, which is educating each and every student to be a lifelong learner and a caring, responsible citizen. And when you get to this point, those can be words on a poster, or those can be words that drive what we do. And I apologize for reading from a PowerPoint slide, but this quote really encapsulates what this is all about. So the true mission of a school is revealed by what people do, not what they say. So educators committed to bringing their mission statement to life are relentless in examining every practice, procedure, and decision, and asking, is this consistent with our mission of high levels of learning for all students? This next slide is Josh Wilkinson, a math teacher at the high school, and he talks about how he uses 3 questions to guide the learning process in his class.
When I think of learning-based grading, I really think of 3 questions that come up in terms of what we want to do with students in our classroom. The first one is, where am I going? So we want to be really clear with students, like what we're teaching is moving towards something that they're going to have to know for a quiz or a test. So I want to be clear in that process to say, hey, here's what you need to know, and here's what I want you to know it by. The second one is the students need to know where they're at. So where am I at any point through that learning process? Because if they know where they're at, then they have the ability to do something about it. So if they are already a place where they know certain things, can we extend that knowledge to get a little bit deeper? If they're a place where there's certain things that they're missing, can we work with them to improve on those different content pieces that we want them to learn? But the third question I think is actually the most important, which is how do we close the gap? So if we know where we're going and we know where we're at, how do we close the gap between where we're at and where we're going? And I think that's really where learning-based grading really comes into play, is that it allows us to be able to communicate to those kids what they know, but then we can work with them through whether it's an intervention process, whether it's extra instruction, extra practice, whether it's time in class or outside of class. We can now work with them to close the gap of learning to say, in the end, we want you to know this, and we're going to support you to make sure that you've actually learned something in the end. So it's trying to really hold all of our students accountable in learning, not just the ones who maybe get things quickly, not the ones that struggle through. Like, we want to be able to support all of them through that process, and that's where I really think that this is going to be have a positive impact for all the students in the district. Is is that we're holding high standards, but we're also saying that we're going to support the kids through that process that's there and really extend the learning, because when kids go off outside of high school, so it doesn't matter what they do outside of high school, there's certain things that we want them to be able to accomplish. Like, we want them to be able to accomplish their goals after high school. And we know that as we get outside of high school, there's certain times where you have to figure out what it is that you want, and then you may have to put in some extra work to do so, because it may just not come easy to you. So how can we model that a little bit within our classrooms, such that once they get out into the real world, whatever that real world is, they actually have some skills that they've practiced in our building to extend outside of high school, to say that this is something they can do. It might be a tough task, but they know that they have the skills to be able to do it.
Okay, so going back to that idea of just being clear in terms of what it is we want students to know and be able to do, here's a comparison between seeing Chapter 2 test, B-. The questions that Josh referred to for students, where am I going? They need a clear learning target. Kids can hit any target that is clarified and stand still. Where am I at in relation to that target? And how do I close the gap? So B- on Chapter 2 test might tell them kind of where they're at, but not to the specific skills and concepts that have to do with that standard. Whereas if you look at a literature standard, that gets into what the kids are actually doing, using key details in the text to determine the central message. And the teacher would be explicit in terms of what they need to do to show proficiency in that, what developing proficiency would be. So if they are developing, they're clued into, hey, here's what it takes to get to be proficient. And sometimes just clarifying that for students, they get it and can do it. Sometimes they need more teaching, or they need targeted intervention. But there is the possibility to close the gap and to learn what it is they're supposed to learn. Okay, so we wanted to bring student voice and perspective into this presentation. These are survey results that Josh gave to his Advanced Math 4 class. Just kind of checking in with them with the implementation of learning-based assessment practices. Do you think that the grading process is fair? 97.2% said yes. Do you feel you're getting good feedback to support your learning? 100% say yes. And did I, as your teacher, clearly communicate what you needed to learn? So the clarity of that learning target and the support to meet it, both big blue dots there. The next slide, I'll just be quiet for a minute so you can kind of skim through. These are comments that students made regarding the fairness of the class, the feedback to support the learning, and the teacher communicating what you needed to learn. Okay, so going back to our timeline, this year we have, last year we started pilot teams, and those are really teachers that had been engaged in this work years prior through the PLC process. This year we've added to those pilot teams, and this book study, we have several teachers reading Grading from the Inside Out, like I mentioned. We have training on our timeline for the rest of the staff, and there are some things that we need to determine consensus before we proceed to the training point with them. I'm gonna go to the next one. Okay, so I love this quote from Maya Angelou: "When you know better, you do better." We know so much more than we did 7 years ago, and we continue to learn. We've had to break ourselves of some grading practices of the past when we realized that they didn't support learning. And that is hard because they're so ingrained in our brains, not only as students, but also as teachers. For the majority of my teaching career, I was using some practices that didn't support learning. And then to figure out how to do it differently is difficult, but it is the right work. In this next clip, Brenna addresses one example of doing things differently in her English class to support learning.
I also think it's important that we remember that we're teaching kids. We're teaching students who are trying to develop the skills they need. And so our world should look a little different to make sure they actually exit our doors with the skills that they need to succeed. A 16-year-old, if they fail at something the first time, but it's on us to make sure that they walk out the door ready to write in the real world, me failing them doesn't actually teach them how to walk out those doors ready to write, but reassessment might. And so it is important that we think about what our role is in society as a public school and how reassessment fits into that picture.
Okay, so that brings us to the end, and I would just close by saying that we are working to ensure that we are in fact living our district's mission of educating each and every student to be a lifelong learner and caring and responsible adult. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you both. Questions?
So, so a question that I've heard as a parent and as a board member. So we already have a high achieving district. You know, we have great graduation rates. We have a high percentage of our students that are able to go on and go to college if they'd like to. So I guess, and obviously you've studied other districts, and so once we complete this process, what should we expect that's different? Or maybe another different way to ask the question is, how do we define success? If we're successful at implementing this, what does success look like for our students, and how is that distinct from what success looked like 8 years ago before we started this process?
You know, just right off the top of my head, I can see success being where students are so super clear on what they're learning. So I think kids are really good at playing school. Some kids are, and they achieved highly, but they weren't able to really define what they learned necessarily. I think there's going to be more clarity for them. I think they're going to also have some of those skills that they're going to need beyond school, not just relying on what percentage did I get, but they're going to know how to solve problems. They're going to know how to fail and how to fix that, because we know in the working world, not everything is right the first time we do it. And that's going to be an expectation for them. So to me, I guess that's a success when our kids can really articulate, I learned this and here's why.
And when other districts have implemented this, I mean, I know that there's so many different variables that go into what a successful student, ends up looking like. And for me, the best indicator is the one that we don't have, which is they're 10 years out of high school, they're a contributing member of society, they're still, a lifelong learner, and of course that's the data point that's almost impossible to come by. But as other districts have implemented this, has it been, employment? There's more of an employment. There's more that get to go to the college of their choice. I mean, and again, I know that the variables out there are very difficult to come by. I'm just helping out because I think it's very important. This is change, and so as human beings, we're all very resistant to change, and so I think it's good to explain, how we're addressing more students and stuff like that. But, are there other concrete things that we can show too, as far as improved test scores and that might be helpul?
Well, I'll take a shot at that one too.
Okay.
Because there is some quantitative data out there that we can look at and point to, and other districts have looked at. A certain percentage of our students that do go on to post-secondary education have to take some remedial courses once they get there, because they don't have the skills that they need either in math or in English to truly be successful. And so in some of those cases, those students are actually paying for college coursework that they're not getting credit for. Because they're remedial courses. We get reports from each of the 3 universities as to how our students are performing when they do get to the state universities. We hope to see an increase in how our students do at that next level. And I think that's the data that other schools have seen when they've gone into the learning-based grading, is they've seen students that are being more successful at the post-secondary level than students that were before. So those are things that we would hope to see as well.
So
Even though we
improved
still
success-
are high achieving, as students come out of high school, we want to see those students, we want to see that data show that they're high achieving at the post-secondary level as well.
So when we've talked with other schools, a lot of the data that they will collect will be similar to what Mr. Conrad said. You might have a student that has an extremely high GPA, but their ACT score might not be reflective of the GPA that they might walk through a high school with. We want to make sure that the learning is crystal clear with the expectations and then the achievement levels. I think the other component when we've talked with other schools is they look at a student that might come through their school system and have a 3.9 or a 4.0 grade point average. They go to college and they struggle. And they struggle a lot of times because of the assessment components, as well as they have to apply their skills at a higher level instead of maybe through a high school being graded on behavior. It could be extra credit that was received. It could be they raised their hand a certain number of times throughout the semester. And we want to focus solely on the grades, solely on the learning and the skill acquisition, because that is what is important. We know that's what's going to carry forward as students go into the college or career choice that they look at into the future. So that's really kind of the two areas that we know we're going to be able to collect data on. How ready are kids as they go out of our high school and have success in college, and how closely aligned are our assessments to our overall achievement of ACT scores and other maybe national benchmarks in association with how well our students are doing in our classrooms.
I see and have heard too that the learning is more of a partnership with the teacher and the student too, rather than something that's kind of done to them. And so, there's just been a whole different level of engagement in the learning process from the student. So they kind of know how to go off and be a learner when they go to college, because sometimes that's tough. And you don't have the structure that you do in high school, so.
Sasha.
So thank you for doing this work. I know that this is not easy work to do by any means, and one of the things that I would ask, obviously this is better for students, no matter how you slice it, but I can imagine it being really challenging for teachers to manage this kind of a grading scheme. You do a summative assessment and people are evaluated, boom, it's done, you move on to the next thing, right? But with this, you've got to deal with students being at various levels of understanding for topics. So how are teachers managing that and handling that?
They're really leaning into each other. The team really supporting each other as far as helping with some of that remediation or the enrichment that needs to happen, because they can't do it all themselves. So that's the beauty of us being a PLC, and I think that's why this has worked. We're in our pilot teams, is they know they have to help each other out. What are we going to do next for this small portion of kids who didn't get it? So, yeah. Excellent. And sometimes built into the day, too, that I think we can give additional support for kids, too.
And I think as we go through the book study, and I know a lot of the members of the audience can kind of attest to this and equate back to this, but the book talks a little bit about some of those myths, and actually your students so much better when you have more of that formative approach and that balanced assessment approach, that the stakes are still high during those summative assessments, but the formative assessments really then guide your teaching, the reassessments, those other learning components, which I think everybody supports, and everybody certainly as an educator, when you go into this work and go into this field, that's what you want. You want to help your students, and by having that balanced approach, understanding what their strengths are, what their areas of growth are, I think is sometimes different work, but it's the important work that we are undertaking as educators.
I think too that it's different work. Sometimes you'll say, well, it's going to really be a lot more work for teachers, and I think initially a lot of our teachers would say, yeah, I think I'm spending more time with it, but it's working differently. If you think about the formative assessments, it's they may not all be graded or calculated as part of a grade. They're those academic scrimmages or those rehearsals that they talked about a little bit. So that teacher doesn't have to spend all weekend grading this paper other than reading it and identifying what are the areas that the student still lacks those proficiency skills in, but they aren't now recalculating grades all the time because of that. So it is different work, and that's where the whole learning process is, how the teachers spend their time, because we want teachers to have the time to be able to work with kids on the intervention side. Those kids that don't have the skills yet, what can we be doing to help those students get to the level that they need to get? Or conversely, the students that already learned that material and are already proficient, how do we get them to exceed that or get to that next level?
You guys did a great job of, I think, laying out that this has been a very well-considered, deliberate, studied process. It's amazed me that some of our parents have shared comments with me that they are so worried we're just jumping out on the gate and Cedar Falls is just jumping into something. I'm like, have you not lived here long enough? I don't think we've ever really done that, which is a good thing most of the time. But I think when you talk about a mind shift, it's just as much a mind shift for our parents, because we all grew up with A's and B's and knowing that we have a valedictorian and you can take the easy classes and get that 4.0. So I hope that our parents have an opportunity to watch this, because the comments that have been shared with me, I don't think they realize what they're saying, but they're really putting our students, they're pitting them against each other to get the grade and the homework. So I hope that our parents are able to watch this and realize that, I mean, there still are those formative assessments, and if the kids aren't doing them, there is still going to be a repercussion for that. So they can choose to do them, they cannot choose to do them. They will not be progressing towards proficiency should they choose not to do them. But it's important that we look at meeting the needs of every student rather than looking at them as competing against each other, because that's just not, it's not the way that we should be teaching in the public system. So how would you, how do you share that with a parent when they come to you with those kinds of concerns?
Well, I would share the cultural shifts. I mean, this work that has been guiding us for years just shows what we're trying to do. I would share our mission statement. It's each and every student. It's not sorting and selecting some.
Right.
We want to ensure learning for all. And I think it was Gusky's book that said, schools, their purpose in the past was to sort and select, and that worked. But that's not our purpose anymore. So it is ensuring learning. And I think too, looking at it in terms of something like swimming lessons or teaching your child to tie their shoe. I mean, thinking of the things that we're teaching in English and science in that regard, there's a learning progression. And it's not, the second day my daughter was trying to tie her shoe, I wasn't, oh, no, that's, you fail. It's, nope, try, move your hand this way, practice, modeling, feedback, try again, practice, then she got it. We can be doing those sorts of things, supporting learning in that way in these classes. Just remembering what it's like to be a learner. And I think everybody would agree that people learn at different rates. Sometimes it makes sense right away in one class, and another one, you need to hear it again. Or sometimes if I just had a classmate explain it to me, oh, that's what she meant? Oh yeah, that makes sense now. So learning is a process, and just honoring that and supporting that. Ultimately, yeah, you are going to have a grade, but we don't have to grade you when you're first engaging with the concept.
I think this was a wonderful presentation. So I think if our community and our parents have an opportunity to watch it via Channel 15 on YouTube video, if we can put it out on in other formats so that they can see it. I'd like to thank both of you for being here, but I also want to thank everyone that was on the video. I think the majority of you are here tonight, so thank you for coming and supporting it, but also thank you for making it clearer to our community and our parents on what we're doing as a district as we move forward. Thank you.
We've said this quite often. We have the best staff in the world, and there's some of the very best of the best that were here and working on this work right now. And again, the whole focus is on students, their learning. How do we help them succeed and be able to showcase the skills that they need to have to be successful? So thank you.
And the chocolates for you, because we know it takes a lot to come up here and present. So just let them know that as soon as you come up and present, you have chocolate.
Thank you.
You just need to share it with everybody in the audience.
Excuse me. All right, moving on to item G on the agenda, the approval of the high school outdoor track repair bid.
Okay, I think we have a presentation for that. There it is. And Cody Mills from Envision Architects is going to join us and possibly answer any questions that we might have. Who would like to advance the screen for me? Either or.
Just push it.
Just a brief review of what this is all about. If we recall, a couple of board meetings ago, we talked about the all-weather track at the high school. It was originally constructed in 1997, and then we resurfaced it in 2007, and then we performed some additional patchwork back in 2013. Typical track life is in that 8-year range, give or take. As you can see, we managed to get 10 years out of the original track and then an additional 6 years before we repatched it. And when we patched it back in 2013, we were told that it would last maybe 3 more school years, and we're going to be on year 4 this coming spring. Again, these are some of the photographs we took of the track. You'll notice a patch in the upper right-hand corner. The lower right-hand corner, you can see where the track's actually delaminated from the surface, where you can literally put your fingers underneath it and lift the track up. And on the left-hand side, you can see some additional wear and tear that's showing up on the track with thin spots and other items. Typically, an all-weather track like this has some spring to it. I'm not a track coach, but typically it'll have some spring on it, and there is really no spring left when the athletes run on that track. It's pretty hard surfaced. So we did have 5 bidders submit bids for the track. I was pleasantly surprised by the number of bids we received. And the low quote came in from Midwest Track at Denison, Iowa at $99,017, which is substantially less than our $165,000 estimate. And so it would be our recommendation to the board to accept that quote from Midwest Track of Denison to repair the track at the high school. We should be able to get another 7 to 8 years out of that track, similar to what we talked about at a couple board meetings earlier. And it would be a big benefit for our athletes who participate in track, and the work would be performed right at the end of the track season this spring. And like I said, Cody Mills is here, so if you have any other additional questions about the project.
What do you think was the main factor in there being a large variance between our original estimate and where the bids came in? Because it wasn't like the bid that we chose was an outlier. They all seemed to be, within maybe 10% of that figure, which was substantially lower than original estimate. What was different as far as assumptions?
So the 165 included some additional inlet drainage work that should be done on the track in the future, possibly. They're just dangerously close to the track, so we bumped up the number quite a bit for that additional construction to happen, and then we took it out last minute before this project bid, so that was an additional maybe $40,000. So our original number was actually 120, so and it came in at 99. Another reason that it came in so low, we think, is that it was the season that it bid, so they're just trying to line up work for next year. So we believe that was the reason for the low bid.
And we believe we're going to be hopefully first on the list with this contractor, so they can get in right away as soon as the season is completed, and hopefully the day of or the day after state track.
Any other questions for Cody?
We've talked a lot about the reasons and rationale behind this, and the safety and security of the site, as well as the longevity as we look at a new high school and a new high school building. And certainly this is something that we know over the next 7 to 8 years certainly will have a lifespan that will be well used, as well as future community use. We talked last time about all the different community organizations, Tiger Track, and different entities that use this space, and certainly it's going to be a great investment for not only our students but our community as a whole.
Do I have a motion to approve the outdoor track repair bid?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education approve the high school outdoor track repair project bid from Midwest Tennis and Track of Denison, Iowa in the amount of $99,017.
Thank you, Sasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Jeff.
Just a clarification question. So do we have do we have some additional, obviously, architectural fees on top of this? Is it just a percentage?
Yeah, it would be a percentage of, don't hold me to it, but I believe it's 10%.
10% for the track?
For the design work, correct.
Design. So, okay. So as I think about track, and probably I'm oversimplifying, I just think of, ripping up asphalt and laying down asphalt. As far as true, is there a lot of design? I mean, that sounds like a pretty generous fee, but I don't understand the full details of what all the work that's involved.
Well, and typically the local design teams, based on the size of a project, pretty much have a set fee. If it's between a certain dollar amount, it's a certain percentage, and as the project increases in scope and size, then that percentage will typically come down. And this happens to fall in that range. And don't hold me to the 10%, but I believe that's what it is.
So I think the answer is yes. There's a little bit more involved with it than that, especially as you're laying out the size, the lines and different components and the different triangles for start and stop, because those all get removed and taken off, and then you have to get those replaced, and they'll have to be strung, and it's a lot more complicated than just tearing up and repainting.
And there's a little bit of civil work as we explored the stormwater runoff issues that we have in the area too, and that was included in that.
All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Cody, for being here this evening. Moving on now to item H on the agenda, the approval of the delivery van bid.
And I do not have a slide for this, but as if any of you are intimately familiar with the school district, we have a series of step vans that deliver our food service product from our two central kitchens and our bakery to the various sites across the district. And we have one of those vans that is coming up on its last legs of life, for lack of a better way to describe it. And we asked for quotations to replace that van. We received 2 quotes, and it would be our recommendation to accept a low bid from Witham Ford at $56,382. If you're not familiar with what a step van looks like, think of a bread truck van. They're very, very similar to that. There is a lift on the back of these vans that help load and unload the carts that the food service team needs to transport food to different attendance centers throughout the district. It takes a considerable amount of time to get these vans. They're sort of like ordering school buses, so ordering it now should assure delivery in time for next school year.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the delivery van bid?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education approve the bid from Dick Witham Ford of Waterloo, Iowa in the amount of $56,382 for a food service van.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments?
This is part of our 10-year physical plant and equipment levy expenditure plan. So this was a planned expenditure just as we look at replacement of our fleet and maintenance of our fleet.
All right, hearing no discussion or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
A couple different items. Number one, January 8th is our next board meeting. We do not have a meeting at the end of December. And again, I would reinforce what Harlow said. Happy holidays to everybody. January 10th is our board admin retreat. We are working to set up a visit to Aldridge Elementary just so the board members can see the progress on the work. They're starting to get windows installed and actually some areas that have heat as they begin the winter work for finishing on the inside. Very, very exciting. We did send out to, as part of one of the updates, just some information on from our last board meeting about mission and visioning and some of the work that's going on, and certainly some of our essential learnings and kind of goal areas that we'll continue to bring back to the board to have deeper discussions as well. It's really neat just to see the great work that's going on and really that focus on student learning across our district.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Pattee?
Well, not necessarily a question, but actually going off of our board goals, the second one on here is for us to benchmark basically our district against other high achieving districts. And so I guess I would ask, we're in the process of trying to identify some high achieving districts, and we have kind of a first draft, but if other board members have other districts that you're aware of, or even in our community that, we have people that have lived in a lot of different places. If there's a district that we should consider on our list, no guarantee that will necessarily make the list because we have a limited number that we can actually go and visit. But if you have a suggestion for a district, you say, hey, this is a fantastic district. Again, we're looking for the opportunity not just to compare us with districts that are within 60 miles or even within the state of Iowa, because our kids are going to go out in the world and they're going to compete with kids coming from high achieving districts throughout the country. So anyway, if you know a district that you think should be considered, please pass it on to Joyce or I.
Thank you. Anything else to come before the board? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.